Hey, we are about to start this series, Fixer Upper, this morning. And so this is a brand new series for us. We also are trying something new here. We are broadcasting live on Facebook right now. So if you want to get your app open and watch live and you can see up closer, like if you're in the back, it'd be easier to see me on there. But we're doing that because not because we want people to not go to church and watch church online, but we're doing that because we want to use this as an opportunity for you to invite your friends to church with you. It is a great, easy step for them to say, hey, if you're not super comfortable coming yet, check it out online before you come, and you can watch it, and then you can watch it live with us, and then, isn't technology crazy? Yeah? All right. So, and then they can watch it online, and then it can be an easy step to invite them to come to church with you. Which, by the way, next week is our end of summer bash, and it is going to be a blast. We are going to have ponies. Who loves ponies? All right, yeah. Let's try that again. Who loves ponies? At home on Facebook, you can say woohoo too. I love ponies. I can't wait to see the ponies. We're going to be able to braid their hair and do all kinds of stuff with them. We're also going to have our inflatable pirate ship, so that's going to be awesome. And we're going to have hot dogs and just tons of food out there for free. We're going to have a flag football game going. And so if any of you older guys want to show up, the younger guys, you're welcome to do that. But this is a fantastic opportunity to invite some friends to come to church. We're going to have church like normal, and then afterwards we'll have the end of summer bash. It'll be right out in the parking lot. So as you leave next Sunday, it'll just be right there, and we'll just have a bash out there, have some fun together. But we are starting this series, Fixer Upper. Has anybody seen the TV show Fixer Upper? Raise your hand if you've seen it. Chip and Joanna Gaines, they are this couple down in Texas. And what they do is they take a couple and they find 3 homes that are fixer-uppers. And I mean, some of these places are dumps. And what they do is they offer their services that the couple will hire them, they'll buy the house, and then they will transform it into this beautiful, majestic house. And if you've ever watched it, they work miracles with these houses. And so I was thinking about our relationship with God and our relationship with other people. And if you're like me, like you're a human, then there is a good chance that your relationships at times have suffered. That at times your relationships with each other or your relationship with God has gotten kind of the point where if you were a house, you would be what people would deem a fixer-upper, right? You have junk over in this room. You have some holes in the plaster in this room. You started to remodel a bathroom here. Nobody would ever do this, and like a year later, you still haven't finished it. Yeah, see, I've done that too. We still need to finish the bathroom. I started a remodel a year ago and it's not finished. There are these places in our lives where we would love to ignore it. We'd love to come to church and pretend like everything's just okay. But at the end of the day, what's really going on is inside of us, there are some things that need some fixing up. And what I know from having met Jesus of Nazareth myself, having him infect and change and transform my life, is that he is so much better at fixing things up than Chip and Joanna Gaines. He is able to come into our lives, and some of you know this all too well. He's able to come into your life and take what looks like a mess and transform it and redeem it and make it something really beautiful. And so we are starting a journey over the next few weeks throughout this month of September. We're going to just be talking about fixer-uppers and different ways that God wants to fix us up. As I was studying for this sermon, I thought of this movie that I saw years ago. It was in 2010 when it came out. It was called Waiting for Superman. Has anybody seen that? Okay, if you haven't, it's okay. It's a documentary, so if you don't like documentaries, don't go watch it. But it's about the educational system in the United States and some things that are broken or were perceived to be broken in it. And one of the things that they talked about, one of the statistics that they gave, was that when American students were tested against the rest of the world, against kind of these 8 major other countries or nations, what they found was that we ranked really poorly compared to everybody else. As a matter of fact, in math, out of 8 developed nations, the United States ranked, can anybody guess? What do you think? 8? 8? Yeah, we ranked 8th out of 8, all right? We were the lowest of the lows in math. Now, here's what's interesting about the statistic. It's not just that our kids are not like super smart at math, but what was interesting about the statistic was they asked the American students, how well do you think you did on the math portion? Guess what number we got on how much confidence we have? Who wants to guess? What? First? Yeah, we are number 1 in confidence, baby. All right? So what it means is our kids are really stupid, but they don't know it, all right? That's all it means, is that We don't know what we're talking about, but ignorance is bliss, right? And there's kind of this sense in our culture today, isn't there, that for kids, we kind of baby them along. When I was a youth pastor, I was so surprised when I had this teenager come up to me and they told me they had flunked a test. I don't know if it's still like this today, but they said, I flunked this test, and I said, oh man, that stinks. I remember getting Fs and it just messes up your grade point average. And he was like, oh, no. I'll get to go in and take the test again. I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, you kind of get to take it till you get a passing grade. And I was like, where was this when I was a kid, right? Did anybody have that when you were kids? No, you got an F and you got an F, right? And what we've started to do with our kids, and you've seen this probably, is we've kind of given a participation trophy for everything they do, right? If you participated, you get a trophy, you get a little medallion thing, and a gold star. You get something for participating. Everybody loves like building up kids. So much to the point that we get our kids to this level where they think they're good at something, but they're really not, right? And this is a reality. If you've worked with kind of this generation or this newer generation, sorry, this is you guys I'm talking about, I'm sorry. But if you've worked with this next generation, you've found that there is this incredible ability for them to think they can do anything, but not have the skills to do much of anything. Have you found that to be true? There is this place, and do you know why? Because we tell kids, so I actually told my son this the other day, Peter, you can do anything you want. And I started thinking about it, and I was like, that's not really true, is it? Right? That's not really true. He's not going to be able to do anything that he wants. The reality is my son has a specific amount of skill in his life. He has a specific intellect, and he is going to be able to do things that kind of meet the requirements of the skills and the intellect that he has, right? Now, hopefully he's going to be somebody who works very hard. Hopefully he's going to be somebody who goes out and tries really hard, and he puts a lot of effort and has a lot of grit in his life. But the reality is we can't just do anything we want. But we are breeding inside of these kids this overinflated self-esteem of who they are to where they can rank last in math and think that they would rank first. Isn't that a messed up system? I really think what we probably need to do is beat this out of our children, don't you think? Like just knock them over the head with how dumb they are. No, I'm totally joking. I would never do that. I would never do it because you know as well as I do, very soon the world is going to do that to them, right? There is this place where the marketplace or the workplace very quickly puts you into the groove of who you are. It measures you, and it will either find you wanting or not, won't it? And there's a place, I remember my very first job out of college, my title had director in it, so I thought, I'm a director, that's awesome, right? I mean, you are a director. Do you know what part of the things that I directed was? I directed cleaning the toilets and taking out the trash. Did anybody else have a job like that where part of what you were supposed to do is not just like the job, but you had other stuff to do? And there was this place where it was very humbling for me, it was very hard for me, and I think most of us, when we get into the workforce, we realize that we are not quite as good as we think we are, that we are not quite as talented, and there is this huge learning curve, and there's all this stuff that nobody told us about that we have to figure out and we have to get good at. And what the reality is for a lot of us, we no longer have an overinflated view of ourselves, but we have an underdeflated view of who we are. And we are a little bit broken, and we're a little bit worn out, and we're just kind of tired, and we just get up in the morning, and we go to work, and we work all day, and then we come home, and we put in whatever we have to put in at home to make everybody happy, and then when we're done with that, we go to bed, and then we get up, and we go to work, and we work all day, and then we come home, and we put in whatever we have to put in. And some of you adults in here, while our kids are sky high on their self-esteem and how they think of themselves, you look at your own life, and you're like, I just don't have anything to offer anymore. I don't even know that I want to try to offer anymore. That's the truth of our situation. Some of us are overinflated in our self-view, and some of us are deflated in our self-view. This morning, I want to offer you something that is a third way of looking at this, a third perspective on a view of how to think of yourself. We're actually going to look at a perspective Jesus offered us as we think about how to fix up our life, how to kind of restore something inside of ourselves. So if you guys would open up to Matthew chapter 5. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 5. And while you're turning there, let me tell you, Matthew chapter 5 is where Jesus starts this sermon called the Sermon on the Mount. and it's very Jewish. Jesus was Jewish, if you didn't know, so it's very Jewish. And he talks first about people who are blessed, and his order of people who are blessed is super backwards from what you would expect. You'd expect him to say, blessed are the rich, because they have a lot of stuff. And instead he says, blessed are the poor. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom. And he goes on, and he talks about blessed are those who mourn, and they'll be comforted, and blessed are those who are persecuted, people who are ripped out of their homes, basically, for having faith in God. Blessed are those people. Jesus is like, if you're sitting in the audience, you would be shocked a little bit by this list of blessings. And we're about to jump into this next section where he starts to change his motif a little bit, and he starts to go into a separate set of teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to do something a little bit different than I've ever done before, because we're going to look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 13, and we're just going to look at 513a, all right? That means we're just going to look at the very first sentence. When you get to a period in 513, that's all we're going to study. 7 total words out of the New Testament this morning, all right? Something I've never done before, so I'm hoping it's good. But I want to look at a third way that Jesus gives us to view ourselves and to think of ourselves, all right? So let's read the whole part. Matthew 5:13a says this: "You are the salt of the earth." That sounds good. Before, have you ever heard of somebody being called, "Oh, they're just the salt of the earth"? Have you ever heard somebody say that, and you're like, "Oh, yeah, it just sounds sweet, doesn't it? They're just the salt of the earth." We don't really know what it means, but it sounds sweet, yeah? So this morning, what I want to do is we're going to take these words, we're going to break it apart, we're going to go word by word and look at it word by word, and I want to take those individual words and look at them in the context of the greater idea that Jesus is giving us in this one sentence, all right? Is that good with you guys? So here we go. You is the first word. I've been thinking about how intentional Jesus was with his words. You know, he was able to take his words, and with very few words, he could impact lots of people, and he could change their life. He could bring healing and hope into their world. And Jesus could also disseminate, take apart entire religious systems with his words. With very few words, he was able to pierce through things. And Jesus is so intentional with his words, and he starts out this with something that is undeniable. He says, you. Jesus is not talking to somebody else here. Our tendency in the church, in the world, is when we hear something, especially something good said about ourselves, is to point and think, that must be for somebody else. This isn't for somebody else. This is for you. Jesus is talking about you, specifically to you. He wants you to hear this. He wants you to be thinking about it. He wants you to ingest it and to take it in. And this is you that he's talking about. It's not you because you're good enough. It's not you because you have it all together. Jesus is talking about you because he, get this, he has chosen you. He chose you. That's powerful. See, in our inflated view of ourselves when we think we can do anything. And I remember when I was a teenager, I remember literally being like, maybe I'll just be a famous actor someday. Right? I was like, I could do that. Or maybe I'll start a business and I'll make tons of money. I remember I was all over the place, schizophrenic with all the different things that I thought I could be, because I'd been told you can be anything you want. And so I thought, whatever I want, I'm just going to choose it, right? I'm just going to choose it and I'll go out. But that overinflated thing is all about you internally. It's all about focusing on you and making you the highest source of everything. But Jesus' you is totally different. Jesus' you is not about how great you are, but the very fact that he chose you, even with you not being perfect. He chose you in the midst of you being sinful. He chose you not because of how good you are and how much you have everything together, but he chose you, get this, because he loves you. That's way more powerful than he chose you because you're good, right? That denotes this sense that he wants a relationship with you, that he wants to know you. Jesus is intentional with his words. He doesn't say the person next to you. He doesn't say just anybody. He says you, and then he says you are. I want to argue with the you. I really do. If I'm honest with you, I want to argue with you because I'm not good enough. I don't have it together. My initial instinct is to just go, not me, Jesus, somebody else, right? It should be somebody is the salt of the earth. But the R makes it hard for me to argue with the you because the R denotes that Jesus knows something about me. You are. He is speaking a truth over my life that I cannot argue with. You are. You are. He leaves no room for you to argue with him. He leaves no room for you to debate with him. He is making a truthism, and you can either choose to believe it or you can choose not to believe it, but he is making a statement about you. You are. You are the salt. The salt. Now, I was thinking about salt. How many of you have salt in your home? Come on, everybody. I knew it. I'm like a mind reader, all right? Salt seems kind of silly, doesn't it? Like if I'm writing this in today's world, I'd be like, you are a muscle car, right? And I would want to use something powerful. It's something like explosive. I want to give you some. You are a Harley Davidson cruising down the highway. That's what I want Jesus to use. And you read this, and when you're going word by word, you're like, you are salt. Huh. Well, that's odd, Jesus. Now, I think it's important real quick for us to have a quick history lesson on salt. Now, I don't want to get into the sleepy, I'm going to go to sleep history. Just real quick lesson on this. Salt throughout the world has been vital to the sustentation of nations. Like in historical times, actually during the time that Jesus lived, the Romans, they limited the amount of salt production that could be created during any time. So salt became uber valuable. People would actually trade salt as though it was a currency. So can you imagine walking around with your salt shaker and be like, put out your hand, I'll pay for that, that McDonald's with some salt, right? That'd be super funny, I think. And yeah, thanks, I appreciate that. The fake laugh. You're so funny, Kent. Jesus is using salt because it is vital to their world. You literally cannot live with salt in an ancient world without salt. You needed salt to preserve meats. Most of you know that. You've ever been to Lambert's with the throat rolls, and they have the big hams that are the salt-cured hams, right? You preserved meat with it because there was no refrigeration system. You flavored your meat with it. As a matter of fact, the Romans, some of you probably know this already, but the Romans would pay their soldiers partially in salt. This is where our word salary came from. They would get paid with salt, and it became known as the salary. Our word for salad came from salt because Romans would take green leaves and they would put salt on it and they would eat it, and it became known as a salad and salted greens. This is what the word salt means. Now here's the deal. This is why salt is so very important. Because in every context that salt is added into, every time salt is added to something, it changes the condition of everything that it comes into contact with. Think about that for a moment. Salt, when it's added to meat, preserves it. When it's added and left on it, it preserves the meat, keeps it from spoiling or going bad. Salt, when you're eating something that is saltless or flavorless, like lettuce, you can put it on, and it actually activates the taste buds in your tongue to open up. And what salt does is it allows your taste buds to receive more of the flavor of whatever you're eating. Isn't that interesting? Salt changes the context and the condition of every single thing that it comes into contact with. And what Jesus is saying is, you are the salt. You are the very thing that is God's change agent in the world. I loved what Bill said during communion when he read the passage about we are God's ambassadors in this world. We are the carriers of the message. We are the ones who come and bring the salt into this flavorless world, this dying world. If you are a Christ follower, if you're not, you have no responsibility to bring salt into the place where you live. You just get a free ride on this, a free pass. Maybe somebody will salt you a little bit, maybe not. But if you're a Christ follower, you have no choice but to view your life through this elevated vision, not something that is overinflated where you think you are super special and you've got everything and you're so good, or so underinflated that you feel worthless and nobody would want you and nobody wants you around. Your vision of your life should be that you, in every single context that you go into, are to change the condition around you. That's powerful when you think about it. You're not to go in and be some Billy Graham crusader who preaches on the street corner. I mean, maybe that's your call. Maybe God actually gives you a specific call for that. But if he hasn't given you a call for that, your role is to go in and to begin to molecularly change the structure around you, to influence the world around you. That every single person that you come into contact with will be changed because they knew you. Not changed necessarily in major ways, but changed in minute ways that are subtle, that begin to change everything from the inside out. This is what salt does. Jesus calling you salt is not a mistake. It is not a silly thing. It is intentional. It is powerful because salt changes the condition of everything it touches. And you, as a Christ follower, should change the condition of everything you touch. Let me just ask you, is your family, your extended family, your close family, are they impacted by you being a Christ follower? Just the way that you talk, the way that you live among them, the way that you act around them, are they impacted by your saltiness? What about your friends? Are your friends impacted by it? Do they feel the? I think it's almost something that's so subtle that it's hard for people to describe, but they know it. They know that there's something different about you. You'll see it because they will act a little bit differently around you. They might not cuss as much, or they might apologize at least for cussing, right? There's something that's changing, that is moving the environment. This is what's so powerful about Christians who have the gift of the Holy Spirit inside of them, is that they literally change the environments that they go into. You are the salt. What I love about this next word is it also seems kind of silly, especially for me in a sermon, to break it down. Salt of, right? It's funny for me to break it down to a little word of. You are the salt of. But what the of does for me, at least, is it reminds me that my saltiness is not because of my goodness. My saltiness comes from somewhere, right? My saltiness finds its beginning somewhere other than me. I am the salt of something else. It is not that I am so good. I stand up here today, and I'm telling you, I am not a good man on my own. I've said that before a lot, but apart from Jesus, I'm a schlub. I am a jerk. There are times in my life, even as a pastor, where I kind of let my relationship with Jesus slip, and I'm not spending as much time with him. I'm not as close to him. And you know how I can tell? Because my saltiness starts to go away. You can ask my wife. She probably would be too nice to tell you, but I can be a real jerk. I can be just the kind of guy who flies off the handle or gets angry. And you know what the difference is for me? It is the time spent with the Savior of the world. That's it. It's nothing fancy. I don't have a bunch of, I do this order of 5 things and it fixes me every single time. I just spend time with Jesus and it transforms who I am. Being a Christian is not difficult in what to do. Being a Christian is difficult in actually doing it. I am the salt of, not of Kent. I'm not salty because I'm so good. If I'm good, the only reason I'm good is because the cross has influenced me. I am the salt of, and it reminds me that my saltiness comes from somewhere. Listen to this. You are the salt of the earth. Of the earth. Now, this one kind of stumped me for a little bit. I was like, well, I don't know, the earth. He could have just said, you're the salt, you're the salt shaker. You're the salt on the table, salt of the earth. And then I started studying this region that Jesus lived in. You guys know he lived in Israel, Jerusalem. Do you know the 2 major bodies of water that were there in Israel? There's the Sea of Galilee, and then there's another place called the Dead Sea. Dead Sea sounds really nice, doesn't it? I want to go vacation there. The Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is the lowest point on earth. It is the salty, so incredibly salty, the sea. If you guys will show the pictures, I think we have some pictures. There are these cliffs on the south side of the Dead Sea. It's called Mount Sodom. And if you're listening by CD, we just have these pictures of these beautiful cliffs. You can look it up on Google, Mount Sodom, and you'll find some of these pictures. But Mount Sodom is just like pure salt. If you keep going, this is a rock cliff that's all salt. This is a cave inside, because as water has rained, it has washed out some of these caves. They actually think these caves are where Lot hid out when Sodom and Gomorrah were being destroyed. They also think that King David spent some time in some of these caves. I look at that cave and all I see is the need for a giant steak. You rub it on the wall, get a grill out. Could you imagine just rubbing your meat on the wall and eating it? Oh, so it is this beautiful place. Go to the next one. This is what they call Lot's wife. If you remember from the Bible, Lot's wife turned and looked back, and she got turned into a pillar of salt. I didn't know that that's actually what it is, but it looks kind of like a person. and you look at that and you think, I don't know if that's salt that I would want to eat. That's called halite. We actually use this. You may even have some in your garage. This is what we call rock salt, and we throw it down on driveways and on roads when it's icy out, right? That's what halite is used for. And they actually, in ancient times, they would still use this because it had salt in it. It just had minerals that colored it this brown color. And they would use it on their food because it was salty. And they actually thought the minerals sometimes provided different kinds of flavorings to it. The Dead Sea is one of the primary locations that people in Jesus' time got their salt from. It was so important that King Herod, from the Bible, built some fortifications around the Dead Sea area. He built these areas, these fortifications, to protect it and keep it, because salt mattered so much. And when Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth," I don't think people would have heard anything else but, "You are Mount Sodom. You are the salt of the earth. You are the place where all of our salt comes from. Without you, there is no salt production." This place is actually, it's so salty that it's growing 8 millimeters every single year after year, for thousands of years. It has grown every single year because there's so much salt being poured into it. It continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You are the salt of the earth. You are the Mount Sodom. You are the place where all of the world gets its salt from. I think Jesus is making a huge statement here. And it is so huge that it cannot be missed. And I'm going to say something that when I first heard this statement, it doesn't originate with me, but when I first heard it, I kind of had a difficulty with it. And it was this, that the local church is the hope of the world. You, the local church, are the hope of the world. I added to that statement, the salt of the earth. When I first heard that statement, I thought, no, you've got it wrong. Jesus is the hope of the world, right, Christian? But as I started to think about it, I thought, no, you know what? I think that's right. Because Jesus has a vehicle that is the delivery of his hope. And do you know what that vehicle of delivery is? It is you and me. This is why the local church matters so much. This is why I'm glad that people can sit at home and watch us on Facebook and watch it on the computer, but it's why being a part of the local body of Christ really matters. Like engaging with the body of Christ matters, because Jesus gave the church marching orders to take the gospel into the world, to be the salt of the earth, to be the place where the salt production comes from, where all of the salt comes from in this world is to come from you and I. And when you and I disconnect from each other, and when we disconnect from being in the world, when we make those two disconnections, we say to the world, go to hell. We just say to the world, go to hell. I don't really care about you. I don't care about... This is why at our church we're doing things like the end of summer bash, right? Because we don't want to say to the world, go to hell. We want to be the salt of the earth. We want for our saltiness to come from the King, and for us to be this bastion in our world that changes the world at every single level. I was thinking about one of my favorite ways to cook a steak. You guys want to learn a new way to cook a steak? Oh, so good. Who loves steak? Raise your hand. All right, who doesn't love steak? You can leave now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Oh, but I'll invite you over for steak because then I can eat yours. So I actually like you better. One of my favorite ways to eat a steak is to salt a steak. Have you ever done this before? You cover the steak completely in salt. I mean, like where all you can see is white. You don't want to see any brown coming through the steak. You want it on the bottom, the sides. The thing is just drenched in salt, all right? And if we have about inch-thick steaks, so we leave it for about 30 minutes tops. You don't want to leave it any longer than that or you'll ruin it. But you want to leave it for about 30 minutes on an inch-thick steak, and then eventually you wash off the salt and you cook it. You dry it off and you cook it. What happens while that salt is on the steak for 30 minutes is that the process of osmosis begins to draw water out of the steak. Now, I know what you're thinking. Kent, I'm going to have a dry steak. Here's the deal. All of the moisture from a steak comes from the fat, not from the water. The water mostly evaporates out of the steak, all right? So as you're doing this, the water is being sucked out of the steak into the salt. And then at some point, the steak begins to suck the salt water solution back into itself. It doesn't suck it all the way in, but it sucks some of it back in. And what happens is the salt flavor begins to permeate the entire piece of meat. So when you eat it, it's not like you just have salt on the outside. It's like every single inch and every centimeter, every millimeter of that steak is flavored with salt, and it's so good and so beautiful, and you eat it. And not only does it do that, not only does it flavor the steak completely. Is anybody getting hungry now? Oh, baby, I'll see you guys. I'm out. Now, not only does it flavor it all the way through, but the salt, as it begins to make its way into the meat, it begins to actually change the structure of the proteins, and it breaks the strings of proteins down so that they are more malleable. And what this means is that your steak is actually more tender because of the salt that you've put on it. It changes everything. I wonder, Christian, are we really like salt in this world? Or have we hidden it to ourselves? You know, one of the things that Jesus says next, I don't even have the passage, you can read it in your Bible if you want. But he says, what good is salt if it loses its saltiness? You know what it's good for, Jesus said? You just throw it out in the street. I researched this a little bit, and what actually would happen is some people would keep their salt like in a little hut kind of thing, and it was like piled up. And if water or anything got into it, it could leach the actual salt out of those minerals. Because remember, we saw the halite, and it's brown, and it's not just straight table salt like what we're used to, right? And so it could actually leach the salt out of it and leave the minerals. So it still looked like salt. But when you tasted it, guess what? All the saltiness had gone away. All the saltiness had gone away. And the only thing that was left to do with it was to throw it out. Folks, Jesus calls you and I to be the salt of the earth. For us to transform the environments that we engage in, the people that we talk to. When you're with your family tonight or tomorrow, they should notice a difference in who you are, not because you're trying harder. Please don't hear me say, go try harder to be a better Christian. They should notice a difference because you went home and you just stripped away all the stuff that you're supposed to do, and instead you spent time with God. How do I do that? Well, you spend time with God. How do you do that? Well, here's two ways. You can pray. You can read your scriptures. There's lots of ways. You can go journal. You can fast. There are some people who fast. They don't eat meals to focus their attention on God. And say, the attention that I would be focusing on this meal, I'm going to focus the attention on God. There are lots of ways. You can research these kind of ways to follow God and to get to know Him, and just focus your attention on Him. But ultimately, when we're saying spend time with Jesus, I'm saying focus your attention on God, not on other stuff, not on your bills, not on how lunch is coming up soon. You focus your attention on God, and it will change the world and the environment that you're in. I'm convinced that this is what the world needs from us. The world doesn't need better preachers. The world doesn't need better worship services. The world doesn't need more Christian radio music. The world doesn't need bigger Christian bookstores that everybody could go into and shop and feel really comfortable in. What the world needs from us is for us to be the ambassadors of Jesus in this world. For us to be the delivery system for God of His grace in this world. I was thinking about, this week, I was just living out Kent, my life, but I was at Sonic. I was getting a large Coke Zero with easy ice and cherry syrup in it, all right? Just in case anybody wants to, surprise me or anything. You got that, right? Everybody wrote that down? I was getting the drink, and the lady came up to give me my drink, and she said, "How are you doing today?" I said, "Great." I pay for it. And I said, "How are you doing?" And she said, "Honestly, not really all that great." She's normally pretty chipper. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Oh, I just have this horrible headache, and I'm not feeling very good, but I just need to, I got to work, And I'm not anything special. I'm a normal guy. I'm telling you, I'm a super mess up, and this isn't anything special. It's not. You're not going to go, "Oh my goodness, you did, like you healed her." I didn't heal her, all right? So the buildup is too much. What I said to her was just, "You know what? I'll be praying for you." That's all I said. And she kind of stopped and looked at me, and she was like, "Okay, thanks." But I didn't just pray for her. Sometimes Christians say that, and what we mean is, okay, thanks for telling me goodbye, I'm done, right? And they don't actually pray. But I've really been praying for her. Like, not just that day, I've been praying for her. Because Jesus wants me to be salt in her life. He doesn't want me to just interact with the lady at Sonic and let it be good enough that I paid my bill. He wants me to change the environments that I'm in. And that means me being proactive with my faith, not just holding it in. Do you put it under a bushel? No! That's the next thing Jesus talks about is you are a city on a hill. You're a light in a house. Nobody lights a candle and puts a basket over it. Nobody puts a bowl over it and hides the light that they just lit. He has lit a light in you. If your fire is going out, then fix it. Get back in love with Jesus. But you are the salt of the earth. You are to transform every environment that you go into. Christian, that's what the world needs from us. They do not need another sermon. They need you and I to be vibrant flames for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. If you are somebody who doesn't know Jesus, I wanted to read you this passage. I don't even know that it fits with my sermon, but Jesus, as Bill was doing the communion time, this just popped into my head. And I was reminded of who he was. And so I want to read this to you. And if you're not a Christian, and you know you're not saved, you know you don't follow Jesus, then I just want to read this to you because I want you to hear who he was. I want you to get rid of the picture that you see. Have you ever seen the picture of Jesus and he's like this? Right? Maybe in a Methodist church or somewhere, and Jesus going. And he's just looking up to the sky, and he looks super peaceful. I want you to listen to what Isaiah, this was hundreds of years before Jesus. This is how Isaiah described the messenger of the Lord, the one who is coming. This is what he looks like. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed, is what Isaiah says. He says, he grew up before God, like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. So picture a root out of dry ground, right? You can picture dry ground. You know what it's like when it hasn't rained in Kansas. There's this dry ground, but there's this root coming up. There's this shoot that has come up, and it's tender. Nothing, listen to this, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. You know what that means? Jesus was ugly, right? He got himself hit with the ugly stick. There's nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. Listen to this. He was despised. He was despised and rejected by mankind. He was a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces. He was despised and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God. He was stricken by him and afflicted, but he was pierced for what? He was pierced for our transgressions. That's our sinfulness, the bad things that we've done, all the wrong stuff that we've done. He was crushed for our iniquities, for all the wrong things that I've done. He was crushed because of me. He was crushed because of you. The punishment, listen to this, the punishment that brought us peace was on him. The very punishment that has the potential, if you're not a Christ follower, to bring you peace was on Jesus. By his wounds we are healed. We are all like sheep. We've all gone astray. Each of us turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquities of us all. By his wounds, I'm telling you, if you're not a Christ follower, by his wounds you can be healed. You can find salvation in Jesus today. Because he came not just to fix my sin, but through fixing my sin to fix the world's sin. Because Jesus knows if you're not a Christian today and you don't follow him, that you live in a world of other people who don't follow him and don't know him, and they have no hope apart from Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, you die and you go to hell. That's stinking scary to me. Stinking scary. That's the end. And if you don't believe in God, at the very least, you know you just die and it's like you close your eyes and it's done, right? That's the most that you have to hope for. The very least is that Jesus really is Jesus and he's really right about us going to hell apart from him. And what he did was he died so that he could save you, so that his wounds could heal you, And not just that his wounds could heal you, but through healing you, that he puts one more ambassador in this world, in a world where people don't know him, and so that you can actually have a mission to live where you go and help other people find their way back home to God because you found your way back home to God. And so found people find people. And that's what this is about. It's not just about you. It's about saving the whole world through you and through me and through each of us, and each of us being the salt in the world. I'm telling you, today, if you don't know Jesus, this is your day of salvation. This is your day to walk up here, to be brave, and to come talk to me. I'll have my microphone turned off. Nobody else will hear it. We'll sing a song while we're doing this. And you come up and you say, you know what, Kent? I've never even thought about it before, but I need what you're talking about. I need Jesus. This morning is your day. For the rest of you, do not walk out of here and think that it's okay to go back to just living your own, your kind of ho-hum life. You are the salt of the earth. You. Make a difference where you live. You guys stand with us. We're going to sing this song of invitation.